said I wouldn't do a video about Aquaman, but after seeing the movie, I had more to say about it than I thought I would. Aquaman was supposed to be the soft reboot of the DCEU. This movie was going to set the stage for the rest of the universe while seemingly ignoring the last couple of clusterfucks. It's really weird that we got to a point where a studio is banking on, of all characters, Aquaman to be what saves a universe. That's a bad sign right there. But enough of that. You want to know if this movie is any good? I can sum up this movie in a one-word review. Aqua, meh. Is this a good movie? No, not really. Is it the worst? Not by a long shot. It's just your run-of-the-mill bad movie that, like Justice League, feels 10 years older than it actually is. If this came out around when the first Iron Man movie came out, it probably would have been received better, but the film relies too heavily on old superhero movie cliches. It's sort of baffling to me that this was supposed to be the soft reboot of the DCEU because it makes almost all of the same mistakes that Man of Steel made. The film is overly cluttered with too many subplots, there's a totally forced and contrived romance, and very little development on our main character. Jason Momoa is not that great in this movie. I actually thought he was better in Justice League. He seemed more stern and reserved there. Here, he just kind of seems like Jason Momoa reading some corny-ass dialogue, but I really don't think I can blame him for this because I'm sure that's how he was directed. Everyone's acting in this movie is corny and over the top. I blame this on James Wan because almost every actor in this movie has given a better performance than what they give here. Aquaman struggles so much between telling an origin story, a revenge story, a Moses story, a treasure hunt story, and a love story. The origin story is confusing in continuity with the rest of this universe because I thought Aquaman was already fully realized and part of Atlantis, but here he's just kind of an ocean vigilante who stops pirates. Like Man of Steel, the origin story is told out of order at random intervals and the film never establishes how Arthur came to be in contact with the Atlanteans. The film just randomly cuts to him hanging out with Willem Dafoe's character as if he was supposed to be the father figure. There's never a scene where he introduces himself to Arthur or anything, so it comes off as forced and out of place. Him getting the orange suit would be fine, but the suit really doesn't complement Jason Momoa's look. I think if he was a blonde, it would have looked better. They probably would have been okay if they stuck with the suit he wore in Justice League. Also, unlike Justice League, it seems that everyone can talk underwater here. Last time they needed an air pocket, but now they can just talk. It's inconsistent, but I think this is a change for the better. I'm watching a movie about this man-bear goldfish going up against Joffrey the Chump King. I don't need that much realism. Then there's the revenge story involving Black Manta, and this just flat out should not have been in the movie. Black Manta is a cool looking villain, and while he has no real character, we at least understand his motivation, but he is just a side piece that should have either been saved for a sequel or been the primary focus. He pops up in the beginning, the middle, and in a post-credit scene. Cutting him out would probably have made this movie shorter and more tolerable. But at the same time, I wish he was the primary villain because the main villain of this movie is not interesting. The main villain is part of the Moses-like story. It's Aquaman's half-brother who blames Arthur for their mother's death, and he is so uninteresting. His acting is even more over the top than the rest of the cast, and he just can't make his scenes work. Part of me finds it interesting that he looks more like the traditional Aquaman than Jason Momoa does, but I actually prefer Jason Momoa after seeing this performance. All this bad guy wants to do is blow up the surface because humans pollute. This is like an episode of Captain Planet. It's kind of a goofy setup, but they treat it like this epic war is about to start with this opera fish music going. He wants to force these other kingdoms of Atlantis into joining this war on the surface, and he even kills one of their leaders. If he's willing to kill them to further his goal, then why bother asking for their support? You could just not ask them and do it anyway and produce the same result. It's like the movie is trying to show him as pure evil and irredeemable, which makes no sense when they try to give him some redemption at the end. And bullshit that this toothpick could beat up Khal Drogo. The whole time watching him, I just kept wishing that Willem Dafoe was our villain. Willem Dafoe looks like an evil monster man, and he's proven that he can have a lot of fun with over-the-top acting before. But instead, this movie wastes him by having him standing in the background just talking and not doing anything. And then there's this overly long adventure plot where Aquaman and Mera go on a hunt for the long-lost salad fork of fishness, and it's really not interesting. It's like any other MacGuffin. It makes it seem like somehow Aquaman can't beat up this guy without a weapon or something. The two of them constantly just go from random location to random location with almost no lead up. They just go to the Sahara to get a thing, to go to Italy to see another thing, then they go to the center of the earth to hang out with Cthulhu. The whole thing plays out like a lost scene from National Treasure. I mean, I like that the whole movie doesn't take place underwater and that there's some variety in locations, but they could have come up with a more natural way to get these characters from point A to point B. The whole time this story is playing out, we have this stupid love story blossom, and it's just as forced here as it was in Man of Steel. There There is no reason that these two characters should fall in love. They just do. They have no chemistry at all, by the way. And the way they attempt to show them falling in love is straight out of a shitty Nickelodeon made-for-TV movie. Look everyone, he grabbed her hand to pull her out of danger and then they stared into each other's eyes. It's love! Mira is kind of cool. She's like Ariel from The Little Mermaid if she was a waterbender. I actually think that her powers are way more interesting than Arthur's. Honestly, there are just far too many stories in this one movie and the film overstays its welcome with a 2.5-hour runtime. This standalone superhero movie is somehow longer than the superhero team-up movie that came out a little over a year ago. Hey, DC, you've got it backwards. I know I've been largely negative, but there are some positives in this movie. The big one is the cinematography and the set design. This is a gorgeous movie. The ocean looks like something out of a fantasy world. It's great. And the way that they justify how bright Atlantis is underwater makes total sense. Even when they aren't in Atlantis, the coloring of this movie is fantastic and beautiful. This is probably the best looking movie in the DCEU. The action in this movie is surprisingly really good. This is because there is very little shaky cam and a lot of the fight scenes are done in extended takes and the camera moves with the action, conveying a wonderful sense of fast-paced motion. The fun action also complements the tone of this movie really well. This movie actually has a consistent tone the whole way through. It's lighthearted and almost feels like a live-action cartoon, but not as bad as Justice League. This seems more appropriate. The tone is somewhat complemented by the music. The music in this film is not bad, but unoriginal and uninspired. It's generic orchestration with no real memorable tracks. Every time Jason Momoa pops up looking at the camera, they play this heavy metal guitar and it is so hilariously cheesy. It's like the Ghost Rider movies. They also play these pop songs when Aquaman and Mira are on their adventure and they are totally out of place and jarring. The only song in this movie really worth a damn is the credits song with Skylar Grey. But that's just because I love me some Skylar Grey. Just don't make her rap again, Warner Brothers. In the end, Aquaman is not a good superhero movie, but it's not a miserable one. It's a stupid movie that has no idea what it wants to focus on. They ripped a bunch of pages out of the comics and threw them in a script with no rhyme or reason. It was done solely to appease fanboys who can look at the screen and say, "I recognize that!" It makes so many of the same mistakes that Man of Steel did, but it's far less miserable and more visually interesting. But it's still frustrating to watch the same studio make the same mistakes over and over again. Man of Steel jumbled a lot of crap, but the stories in that at least felt like I was watching the same movie. This feels like 3 separate movies shoved into one and it goes on way too long. So, just like Man of Steel, the final score for Aquaman is a 4.5 out of 10. It's really not worth the watch unless you're a woman who wants to rub her clam to Jason Momoa and paste your face over Amber Heard's character. In which case, you're not watching this video. So, that's it for now guys. I'll see you next time. Hey guys, if you enjoy my content then you should follow me on Twitter where I post channel updates and information on upcoming videos. You can find the link in the description. Thanks for watching.